All right, we've started recording. I will call this meeting to order. For the record, Nicole Sting, acting chair on behalf of Melinda Bell. With the first agenda item is public comment. Vienna, do we have any guests in the room or folks online for public comment?
I am not seeing anyone online.
All right, and there's no one in the room. We'll go ahead and move over to roll call. I'll begin the roll call. If you're here, please unmute and say hello. Bruce? Absent? Chris?
Hello, present, thank you.
Uh-oh.
Oh, Chriselle is in the, sorry. All right, Chris, we didn't hear you, but I see that you unmuted, so we'll count you as present today.
Oh, I apologize. Can you
Dave
hear now or no?
To be here. I don't see Debbie.
Nicole, can you check, pause and see that we can hear the folks at home?
Sure, if someone wouldn't mind coming off mute and doing a sound check for us.
Hello?
Hello? Hello?
Oh, good call.
Hello,
Let's try that one more time.
hello,
Hello?
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 Martin, any thoughts?
Still nothing. We tried the different sources.
We hit the test in there just so we can.
Oh, the panelists can hear each other.
Panelists can hear each other. We're having audio issues in the room. Oh, but
That's
from
just
your
on my laptop. The click share. There we
Did we
go.
get it?
Yep.
All right, we've got it. I will continue with roll call. We stopped with Debbie. I don't see Dina in the room or online.
Tina's online.
Oh, I see.
She's just.
Oh, there we go. Let's
Yeah.
promote her. All right. And I think you were probably already said here, and I see you online, so we'll continue to move. Haley, I don't see online or in person. John, the same. Chriselle, I see you. Hello.
Hello?
Len Kimley,
Good morning, everyone.
good morning. Melinda, if you're able to unmute and say hello.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Nathan,
Hi, good morning.
good morning. Nina. Paul. And our vice chair, Ryan, is excused today. Thank you all. Moving forward, are there any member updates to share with the group related to this work or other things relevant to our work together? All right, I'm not seeing any. So let's move on to the next agenda item, which is our executive director report. Executive Director Rogers, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you, Nicole. First words of the morning, apparently. Good morning, everyone. Nice, if you're willing to share your visual, that'd be great for us to see you a little more. Thank you, Nathan. I understand if you are in the middle of, say, driving, no worries. Just wanted to say I'm very eager to share with you the great results of our budget presentation just a few weeks ago. Unanimously, the Housing Authority Board of Directors approved our FY 25-26 requested budget for the Housing Authority. And I want to just express additional gratitude to John Epstein, who's become a long-time HEC member, also former banker, who really lent his reflections and brings a perspective of where we've come in our budget. He helped co-present, and we also felt the support of our Vice Chair Kane, who was in the audience. So it really just felt a nice culmination of how we've been growing as an advisory agency. also a great opportunity for us to have our deputy CFO present on the overarching themes, as we all talked about last time. We are heading into a place where we have a overall positive operating budget with putting in some pretty deep commitments in our capital investments and our development pipeline. And it also shows, I just want to say, it elevated for us the need for us to do some budgeting a little bit differently next year as we get more and more integrated and frankly more interconnected between our housing services side and our HAWC side, housing authority side. We need to be able to do those parts of the budget at the same time. We will then adjust accordingly with you all around, adjust accordingly on how we get this information on our federal programs for May. So we have to do that last minute budgeting sort of pieces to it. The other thing that the board expressed the desire is more of an orientation of our programs in advance of the budget. So just similar to what we do with you all, we are trying to get some time, sort of here are our programs, here's our goals, how does this align with our values and our mission, and then we get into the budget. So this is more just forecasting for next year in a continuous improvement perspective of how we keep doing this budget together with you. For me, it's about storytelling, and if you all can explain the kind of investments we're making, then we are being more successful. So that's the key thing. Also want to let you know we are continuing to build out our FAB team. We are in a recruitment for a controller, and also recruitments for the other vacant positions as well. So you're finally getting back on track with our fabulous FAB team, and we'll be able to get and help hone in on all the work that we do to show you guys what we do financially. So I also want to share with you, also on June 17th at the last HABOD meeting, they approved our Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan update and the Public Housing Admissions and Continued Occupancy Plan. I'm used to just calling it ACOP, but it's a long word. And then these are some things we do generally on an annual basis of update with the latest regulations coming down from HUD. And the latest set of changes and regulations is what we call the Housing Opportunity Through Modernization Act changes, AKA HOPMA. Much prefer to say HOPMA than the Housing Opportunity Through Modernization Act. So we will go with that. But there's a couple key things I wanted to elevate for you all in the HOPMA changes and frankly other admin changes. First is, as we've been talking with you all over the last few months with the early sunset of the emergency housing voucher program, HUD is allowing us to create a local preference of our EHV voucher holders to be able to get higher up on our wait list. So that is a good thing. The one challenge, of course, with that is we are already strapped with how many people we could be moving off of that wait list because of the anticipation that we'll likely be in a shortfall situation. So HUD is trying to respond. Locally, though, our rental market is so tight that it is a little bit harder for us to take advantage. So more to come on that front. We also did some amendments to use our general project-based voucher waitlist for public housing. So the more we're trying to streamline our waitlist practices so people are less confusing of how long, which waitlist they have to be on. And then we have other ways we're modifying and codifying, looking at like local preferences or local zoning for certain for vouchers. And also, just this is generally, Liz isn't here today, but I did want to do a shout out to Liz and her team too. They do a lot of work, especially Em Nichols, who does that work for us. And then outside of all those board meetings, we have some exciting project updates. As you guys, some of you were with us when we purchased Woodspring Apartments a few years ago. It's a senior 172 unit building. It was expiring from their affordability restrictions. The landlord was going to convert it to market, and then there was a pretty across the board outcry from residents, the public, and we were able to secure and acquire the building assistance from OHCS and the county commission. And right now we're in the process, we're moving forward on that redevelopment and preservation plan. And we are, and that will be, we'll be coming later, a much deeper plan, but just wanted to let you know we're getting closer to coming together with financing to be able to do a massive renovation to increase the useful lives of the major systems for the next 20, 30 years. So we were able to get our board to approve the sort of bond issuance, the financing of that project for $47 million. So that's a big hurdle we got to overcome, but great support from our board to move forward with us using tax exempt bonds. And then I'm really, really, really excited to share with you that June is Homeownership Month. And we sold our first Section 18 disposition house to a current resident. So I just these are the moments that keep up, that really make a big difference in the world that we're in. Right now is just one household, but there are more under contract and more to come. But the fact that our first one went to a current resident who lived there for how many years were they living there, Jim? Over 10? Yeah. Over 10 years. And they were able to have the opportunity to buy their own home with a 10% discount. Anyway, it just very meaningful moment because it's a lifelong change. It's a generational opportunity. We get to see it.
I have a question.
Yes, Chair Bell.
Hi, good morning, everyone. How much did the house sell for?
I think it was Italy.
How much did the house sell for, and how many bedrooms was the house?
I'm trying to remember. I thought it was 3 bedrooms, and I think it sold for under 400. We'll get back to you, apparently, with the specifics, but that's a great question. We want to be able to highlight to the extent that we can, that this particular family, but also the ones that are coming too. Yeah. But yeah, the discount is helping. We're also realizing just doing some repairs is also doing some repairs that make it a little bit more, habitable or and sprucing up is also but helpful too. And also, I just have to say, you guys were all, many of you were here when you did that first application, but I think it was back in 2019. So this has been about 6 years in the making for this first sale. Incredible amount of energy and time and investment, but now we're just clicking away and changing lives. With that, I did want to take a moment to share with you all, if you have been tracking some of our board actions. We've gotten a number of questions and trying to create some space for folks to let folks know that we have been in this, as we've been working towards our federal contracts and renewals, we are facing some new language in what we call the assurances, certifications, and attestations that the federal government is asking us to sign off on. So as we all know, it's only month 6 of this administration. They've issued over 100 executive orders. We've been playing a little bit of ping pong of understanding, or whiplash, I should say, of what all this could mean. Some of it's been rolled back. But now we are in a time where we are getting some grant agreements. And those grant agreements are including language that is attesting that we will comply with all executive orders. Additionally, we were notified in actually a news clip that the administration has been identifying and cross-tabbing all counties and cities across a series of terms that they have deemed could mean that we may be violating their executive orders. Washington County was on that list. So that has elevated a little bit of us kind of thinking through a little bit of how we handle these next steps with our federal contracts. It also, that list was unpublished the next day. So it was not clear what the intent is going forward, but we do know we're on a list of sorts. And with that, the board was hoping to take some swift action a couple weeks ago that would put in motion us rescinding and then replacing our equity statement so that we would be in compliance with all the executive orders. What I can share with you, this is a very evolving, very quickly changing situation. What I can share, what I know now today, every day is a little different, is that they are no longer going to be taking that action. They are going to be coming back to the Board of Commissioners on July 22nd with a new equity statement that will be focused on access and opportunity. So it's not a replacement, it's just an additional clarification that we will be in compliance with the federal government's executive orders on diversity, inclusion, and equity, and particularly all what they call applicable anti-discrimination and civil rights. So that's right for now. Our federal contracts are on pause until the board takes action to make sure that our legal counsel is comfortable enough for us to sign on all those attestations, certifications, and assurances that we are not in any way our programs are violating those executive orders. So with that, I would be happy to open up for questions.
Nathan has a question.
Molly, can you hear me? Thanks. Thanks for that summary. I had a question about the attestations. The county's being asked to sign attestations that include executive orders that have been like paused or enjoined by courts. Does that make sense? Because I know a lot of these executive orders have been contested in courts and some have been blocked or stayed. But the county's being asked to sign attestations that they're following all of the executive orders regardless of their legal status in the courts.
That's correct. It's language, they're honing in on a couple key areas. We do know there are some lawsuits in motion. That's one of the things our legal counsel is also looking at and trying to understand the landscape. Every day seems like there's a new judgment. So I think it's sort of going to be a multi-pronged approach. There is specific language though, Nathan, around us promoting diversity, inclusion, and equity policies and programs. So they're specifically calling out those terms in one of the attestations. And then the other ones that they're focusing on are things like elective abortions. You can say, no, you're not actually letting elective abortions. Things like gender ideology. And then there's the other big one for us is anti-immigration, illegal immigration. So they're trying to make sure we are, no funding is going towards someone who does not have legal status. So I think a little bit of some time for us to understand the impact of each of these to all of our programs is what is warranted. But right now the only program that is being caught up in terms of this federal pause is our continuum of care grants. I don't know, Jess, you wanted to share a little bit about that.
So, we have, 8 or so grants that, sub-recipients from our COC grant that we pass through to providers to continue operations of programs. They're all continuing programs. And they each have a different grant cycle. And 2 of them have their annual contracts renewing on July 1st. So while the county pauses to further evaluate our own grant agreement with HUD, we are then necessarily needing to delay the execution of those 2 grants. And so, those 2 contracts. So I've been in communication with those directors to convey this delay and impact their programs, but we hope that it will not pause in any way current program operations.
Looking for any additional questions, but not seeing any. Thank you, Executive Director Rogers. I will now turn it over to VNF for liaison updates.
Great. Just some logistical updates. So usually in the past, we have canceled our July meeting, but this year we're gonna be canceling our August meeting instead. So we will have our July meeting, but we are gonna cancel August, knowing that summer is a very up and down time. So we'll make sure to update the calendar on that. You might start seeing like a different format of how we present our information. So we'll have like a deck slide that has all of the agenda and presentation materials together. Just so you know, that's just gonna be a change that we're slowly rolling out. It's easier for staff to kind of make it a little bit more cohesive, and we're also copying our sister body, Solutions Council, on that format. So trying to make it a little bit more cohesive altogether. Summer social stuff. So we are hosting a social. We're excited about having our bodies get together, socialize, get to know one another, and just have like a good time. So you should have received that invite yesterday. If you didn't, let me know. Please fill out the form that's in that invite if you have like dietary restrictions, allergies. We also want to make sure we're accounting for any like family that is joining us, and also if you're bringing children. So just let us know all of that information that's in that form. And thank you for Nathan and Star for hosting us. We're excited. Y'all get to see an affordable housing property. That's amazing. And you get to enjoy the community room there. It's a really beautiful space. So thank you for that. And then housing forum stuff. We are excited. We're starting the planning for the housing forum this year. It happens every year for new members who don't know. It happens usually in the fall. We try to bring hot topic items to the community, bring people in that space to kind of learn, network, and so we are starting the planning process there. We hope to have a newer element, which is an awards ceremony. We are excited about this new element, hopefully honoring some of the important people that are doing this work in housing and homelessness. So there's more details that will come from that, but we're hoping that our advisory bodies can put in nominations for this kind of inaugural award. So we're excited to have your input on that. And then we'll also have a selection committee. We hope to have our chairs with advisory bodies participate in that. But yeah, more details to come. Hopefully, if we do this every year, it'll be open to the community in the future, but we want to kind of start a little bit smaller and kind of work our way up. So we're excited about that, but like I said, more details about that. So yeah, I think those are our major updates with
Thank you, VNF. And I will provide an update on behalf of Chair Bell about the bylaw update process. The chair and our vice chair and VNF have completed a review of section 1 through 3 of the bylaws, and they're now starting to work on section 4, which is in regards to the officers. Similar to what we're thinking about for Solutions Council, or we're also considering changing chair roles from chair and vice chair to co-chairs, as it allows for increased flexibility and more shared responsibility. It's in alignment with what we see with a lot of other boards and commissions for other housers, including Metro has co-chairs for their advisory bodies. So that's what we're looking at. In addition, we're also changing the term limits from 1 to 2 years, which gives more consistency with leadership. We hope to dive into section 5, which includes rules of procedure. This section may take a few meetings to work through. It's pretty wonky. It's long. And as a reminder, as you're reviewing the bylaws, if you have feedback, I know Chair Bell would be very interested in receiving that, and her or BNF are happy to be resources as you're reviewing the bylaws and have thoughts about that. And lastly, I want to echo Executive Director Molly Rogers. Thank you to Ryan and John for being present during the June 17th Housing Authority Board of Directors meeting. It's great to have that support. We were glad to have John up at the dais with us. And we're really excited that both the department budget and the Housing Authority budget were approved on the same day, and we're all set for next fiscal year. And I'm going to pause here to see if there's any questions. We have some folks that have joined since we first started. If there are other member updates to provide at this time, I'll do a brief pause. All right, I'm not seeing any, and we'll go ahead and move on to our ongoing business. With that, I will pass things over to Jill and Lisa to present on asset mapping.
Thank you so much. For the record, I'm Jill Chen, Assistant Director of the Department of Housing Services. Before I go into the asset mapping that you had asked about, I wanted to just take this time to introduce our new Senior Program Coordinator, Brian Yarn. Brian is just joined us, I think, about a month or 2 months ago. And he's now an old hand already. And he has been critical to this whole integration of housing and homeless services. He has taken on so many other programs or projects that Jess and her team are leading regarding access centers, transitional housing. So we are so thrilled to have Brian Yarn with us. Brian, do you want to say a couple words?
No, I think I've met a few of you before. I think a few of you are on some of my projects, but really excited to be here. There's just a lot of diverse coordination, and it's been really great. So appreciate it.
So we're thrilled to be able to poach him from Portland Housing Bureau. And he comes to us with many years of experience in the legal field as well as in real estate. And he has a master's in real estate development from PSU. So thank you so much for joining us. Okay. Onward to asset mapping. We are coming back to you to talk about our capital assets because you all, a couple of sessions ago, Jess and I had the conversation about the integration of housing and homeless services. And one of the questions you all asked is, well, what does the capital assets look like? Where are our physical assets for housing and homeless services? So this is just a quick presentation through all of it. And I apologize, we didn't get the slides to you ahead of time, but these slides will be sent to you. On the agenda, next slide please, is some quick overview about where we are, a short introduction on the capital assets themselves, and then really to focus on your feedback and discussion. Next slide, over here, next slide. So as background, just wanted to talk a little bit about what were some of the investments that allowed us to have these significant capital assets. The first is the Metro Affordable Housing Bonds that came in with $118 million for all of the, I think it's now 13 projects that we have either in construction, in operations, or in pre-development. In addition to Metro, we also have some PSH funding that is going to go into the PSH project of Forest Grove, as well as some additional funding. We are yet still waiting for the monies. This is also from interest earnings. There's also the supportive housing services measure, in which we have almost over 87 million. These are for one-time capital investments, and these are critical to our building out of the homeless services assets. So you'll see that what we're really looking for is we're seeking engagement in our role, sort of in that housing continuum discussion. And you had already seen Lisa's presentation last time about our 5-year real estate strategy. So this is all integrated, and we're hoping to get more feedback. Next slide, please. Short summary on the 5-year strategy for you, and sort of a prioritize. The first is a prioritized evaluation framework. Second, building a sustainable real estate operations, creating a sustainable pipeline, and having long-term resiliency and sort of world-class asset management. Next slide, please. This is the questions for you to think about. We will be coming back to these questions, but really what we're looking for your, we could call it support and feedback, is what role should the Housing Authority hold in support of addressing housing gaps in the county? Second, should these roles and purposes be different depending on the housing types? Anywhere from, mixed income or market, family, senior, permanent supportive housing, all the way to transitional housing. What is our sort of purpose and role? What are the long and short-term risks that we should weigh and consider? What are the implications for our assets and any other concerns and considerations you might have? And I'm hoping you will think about these questions as we go through the assets that the Department of Housing Services and the Housing Authority hold. Next slide, please. Quick summary, we talked about this slide last time with the housing continuum, all the way from emergency shelters, sort of transitional, subsidized, which is more like our public housing, and some of the deeply affordable housing, the affordable rental housing, all the way to affordable home ownership, and sort of the longer term market housing, which is market rate rentals as well as home ownership. You had asked us to delve a little bit deeper, and we want to show you the next slide where we're talking, next slide, where we're talking about some of the characteristics of these different types of housing. Talk about it in terms of who is our targeted residents, anywhere from homeless all the way to sort of middle income and higher income, all the way from temporary to, you can call it long-term permanent. We talked about the Section 18 disposition for home ownership. Most of those people who own homes will stay for longer than, say, a couple years. The expected area median income of the residents from 0 to no limitation. And it's all broke, you can see that spectrum again. The building typography, which means the type of housing that is most suited or what you will normally see, serving these different populations, from very congregate shelter and pods and hotels to transitional housing, which is more congregate hotels, permanent supportive, which may be motels and single resident occupancies, multifamily, to regulated, which is also multifamily, all the way to townhomes and single family units. So again, the range of typography, typical ownership, who's the ones controlling it, owning it, managing. And you see there's government, sort of nonprofit, for-profits, all the way to essentially private individuals and private ownership. And the typical type of operations, where is our, we will call it, revenue coming from? And how does that work in terms of sustainability? From very government subsidies to philanthropy to very, you can call it nothing, no subsidies, and just profitable versus in that middle range where you're looking at PSH is really rental assistance, and affordable is more rent regulated. So it's in terms of revenues and income that may be capped. To the right, where their home ownership, there is no maximum or caps in terms of returns. Next slide, please. So we also wanted to show you what are some of that assets that the Housing Authority and the Department of Housing Services either own or invest in or control along that housing spectrum or continuum. And everywhere, from the left, which is the access centers, we have 3 access centers, one plan, all the way to emergency shelters, how many emergency shelters, how many transitional housing, where we right now currently have none, but we do have a couple that are planned. And those you'll see in our next few slides. We have public housing. In the public housing and specialized housing column, that's 257, of which 244 are our public housing assets. Out of that, 60 is being disposed for home ownership. And you'll see that over to the right, up to 60 units being disposed for home ownership. In the regulated affordable rental, that is what the Department of Housing Services, HAWK, owns, which is 891. Countywide, it's, I think over maybe 10,500, maybe 10,000 or so. It's a rough number because we don't have specific data. We're relying on data from multiple sources. We do know through the OHCS waitlist that there are 474 in the works.
Is that across the whole county?
That's across the whole county.
Ethan, does that sound about right?
Yeah, we don't have all 10,000, but yeah, sure, it sounds about right.
Oh, Nathan, you don't have 10,000 units. Oh,
Not yet, not yet.
Yet. Thank you, Molly.
Not yet. Not yet. Okay, next slide. So we'll go through first the homeless services capital assets, and we are so thrilled that we actually have a brochure that talks about our capital projects, all of our capital projects that we have printed up, and it's hot off the press. So we'll have these for you also. But we wanted to first just go through our different assets. The first is the access centers, so you'll see that we're gonna break them down by the type of capital asset. So you'll see that there are 3 that is currently in functioning. One that is Beaverton Access Center, that's still yet to be determined. That's why there's no Beaverton block. So, next slide. Our shelter assets, so you'll see that there's a lot of shelters, actually, 9 on here. And there are a few that are, you can call it owned by counties. That's the Beaverton shelter and the Hillsborough shelter. Hillsborough has 2. There's the Hillsborough and also the Bridge shelter. So there's different ownerships and different operational structures. There are also some that are owned by our nonprofit partners, like Casa Amparo, which is number 4, and that's owned and operated by Central Cultural. And there's also some that are, you can call it, owned by the county, but operated by a partner, and that is Hillsborough Bridge Shelter. So operations and ownership may be different, but that is the whole of the capital assets for shelters. Next slide, please. In transitional housing, these are 2 projects that we had talked about last time. One is Transcending Hope with Dina, and the other is our Cornell Road project. Both of those are will be opening sometime, we hope, in 2026. The Cornell Road is right now currently 85 units, and Transcending Hope is 36 units. Next slide, please. As we go into what are the other assets, what are the other projects in, that are supportive housing funded, we have you can call it the Hillsborough Recovery Center, which is the CAT Center, Center for Addiction Triage and Treatment. And there's also, so that's sort of in the right, number 13 in the middle of that map. And then there is number 14, which is that Elm Street property. And that was a site that was purchased using SHS funds that we are planning to redevelop once some of our existing real estate pipeline projects are more advanced. So next slide. In addition to all those capital projects, what we have is also a number of projects that are not funded by SHS. And you'll see here, there are some shelters, Cloverleaf, Safe Place, Community Action Family Shelter, and Good Neighbor Centers. And those are not funded by SHS. Next slide, please. And the big beautiful graph shows how our assets for homeless services are distributed throughout the county. So you'll see that almost every major, you can call it locality, has some kind of service and support to help out some homeless clients. Next slide.
We have a question.
Any questions? Sorry. Chris?
Hi,
And Hayden?
Gil. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So out of all the slides that you just showed with assets, and then all the slides that aren't our assets from the access centers, the emergency shelters, transitional housing, and other projects, what is the percentage of the operations budget that is dependent on SHS funding?
Oh, perfect. Just find it. What percentage of the operations of those assets are funded by SHS? I'm gonna refer to my colleague, Jess Larson.
And he was asking actually for can we go back on
The access centers?
2 slides? That one, Chris, sorry, go back, the not funded. Is that the slide you were asking about, Chris?
Actually, all of them, from the access centers, the emergency shelters, the transitional housing, all of it, either that were originally funded or not funded by SHS. I'm concerned about the operations budget going forward. What percentage are we dependent on the SHS funds for the operations of all of these projects?
It's a great question, and I'll just take it as a conceptual whole, if you will, Chris, because I don't have a financial number for you. We could gather that, but every project would be unique. Some of the projects have graded funding from federal or state resources, but it's true that the vast majority of our homeless services system is operated with SHS resources. SHS funds make up about 90% of our total homeless services capacity. The other 10% coming from some local fund match, and then primarily a combination of HUD COC and state OHCS resources. So it's a very important point that this capital infrastructure is heavily reliant on the continuation of supportive housing services resources. And truthfully, that is the case for about 1,000 households who have rent assistance paid every month through one of our housing programs, and many other services that are funded through that 90% of our homeless services system. So we take this issue kind of as a whole, that the continuation of the homeless service system in Washington County is incredibly reliant on the continuation of supportive housing service resources. And we're gonna need to keep fighting for voter support for those resources when it comes back for renewal. And keep partnering with Metro and cities and our other county partners to ensure strong public trust and support and effective implementation so we can continue those resources in our community. And Because we know that these resources are reliant on that voter reapproval, each of the capital projects that were recently funded through these SHS resources, their contracts include language basically allowing an exit if necessary because we lose this funding. And that is also the case with those rent assistance dollars when we project breaks them into buildings and things like that, because we can't commit resources beyond the current 10-year sunset. Well, the 2030, it's probably more effective to say the 2031 sunset. And we'll need to reevaluate what we do, how we scale down all of that work in the event that it isn't renewed. But we hope that it never comes to that. Frankly, I find some hope that this is a region-wide problem, that when it needs to be renewed, there will be about 10,000 people who are sleeping in a shelter or a housing placement that is funded with SHS dollars. If we don't continue those resources, about 10,000 people will lose a safe place to sleep. And I hope that's enough for voters to say yes, but we're not there yet. So this is how we're managing for this question at the whole. That was a big answer. Why don't I pause and see, was that a helpful answer, or do you want to follow up with any more specific questions?
No, I appreciate it. And I think, you know, anywhere right around 90% or higher was my assumptions. And I guess, you know, we're not there yet, but I would love to know what the strategy or the plan is to help, you know, voters be a little bit, you know, in when the renewal is there, and then even contingency plan for if the worst happens and it isn't renewed. So anyway, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Chris.
And Haley, is that a hand up also?
It is a hand up, yes. You guys also have your hand up. Real quickly before before I ask my question, whoever's hosting the video is typing, and those of us which are virtual are having a difficult time hearing when they're clicking and typing. So I don't know who that is. They're off screen, but if you guys can let them know, it makes it difficult for us to hear. So my real question is, I thought one of the last slides you were presenting, Jill, was real interesting about the distribution of shelters. And, you know, so a lot of, when we're talking about homeless services, it's meeting the need where the need is, and because of access. And is the need being met where it needs to be met? In other words, I noticed what seems like a smaller number of services in Beaverton and a greater density in Hillsborough. Is that where the need is? And is there truly less need in Beaverton, or is that there needs to be more services provided there?
Can we go back to slide 16? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So this is the one that you're seeing, right, Haley, where you
Correct.
see a little
Yes.
more in Hillsborough, but less in Beaverton.
Mm-hmm.
An excellent question. I think that Jill's pointed to me in the room, so I will take it.
I am pointing to our homeless services expert.
One thing that there's so many opportunities. Well, anyway, the map is brilliant, and what we can't see in the map is capacity. So each dot represents one place, but it doesn't represent the number of people that are served in that one place. So that's just one caveat here, is that a lot of those, frankly, the blue dots are older infrastructure that came before SHS, and oftentimes our older infrastructure was much smaller because we didn't have the resources for to serve higher numbers of people. So that's just one little caveat to the map, but your point is still on point. We hope to add a dot to Beaverton for an access center. We've been able to work with partners and city leadership in both Cornelius, Hillsborough, and Tigard to bring about an access center in both of those communities. We're working with the city of Beaverton, but there's a delay in moving forward with their access center, and we hope that that is going to move forward shortly. We have currently reserved some one-time capital resources to help fund an access center in partnership with the city of Beaverton. So that will add an important and necessary dot to Beaverton. And there are other investments underway in Beaverton also, like we have a senior housing project underway that's gonna house a lot of formerly homeless seniors. That's not on the map because it's not funded with SHS, but I do wanna kind of, lift up the great work that Beaverton is doing in other areas. But it is important that we are always considering how we spread out the resources and especially bring them to the city of Beaverton, as you point out, because that is an important need.
I'm just gonna add that, what Jess said, the permanent supportive housing that's spread throughout the county now as a result of carve-outs in the metro projects isn't reflected here. As, so maybe something we may wanna add to a map in the future to kind of show the whole continuum. But that is also kind of spread out throughout the county in terms of where those PSH units are located.
Appreciate it.
Other questions? Not sure if I've seen any other hands.
I have a question. Is there an extensive list of the non-SHS county funded partners or helpers or suppliers of temporary shelters or affordable housing?
Who's doing the work?
Yeah.
Exactly. These are nice lists of buildings and all, but like who's actually doing the work?
Yeah.
Excellent question. Yes, we have our list of suppliers or supporting housing, community-based housing or homeless services providers. There's about 25 organizations we partner with in our system in Washington County. Many of them do a combination of services like outreach, shelter, housing placements, retention work. And some of them just specialize in a particular areas, but it's 25 organizations in whole that are part of our network.
And on the housing side, it's similar, where we do know there are probably a dozen plus owner operators we work with. Yenistar is one of them. So we work closely with Nathan and his team, but there are a bunch of what I would call community-based organizations, CDCs, who do that work. Also some of the for-profits as well. So there is a range, it's more of a range on the housing side. Any other questions before we go to the housing assets? Okay. Just wanted to go through some of the housing assets quickly. We have the public housing projects that you can see on the map. This is our 244 units that are currently in the process of, many of them are single-family homes, and many of them, all the ones that are in red, those red dots, are the ones that are in the process of being sold. The purple are the specialty and transitional, sort of the smaller specialty housing that we're also in the process of disposing, those to our CBOs as well as to potential homeowners. So the red and the purple are being disposed. The blue on that list is the remaining single-family homes that are not Section 18. So those are the ones that may be also up for sale. We are waiting. We're going to be doing a whole portfolio review of our public housing portfolio, but this is where our public housing assets lie. Next slide, please. You had asked us where are our assets? So we broke them down by a couple of different ways. The dark blue is that which the housing authority directly owns, or we are the general partner to. The lighter blue ones on the screen, and it's sort of, I'm not sure if you can see it that well, is that in which we are invested as, say, a special limited partner or provide some kind of support. Where we can be, so you'll see the dark blue, we have about over 1,100 units. 800 are in tax credit partnerships, and the public housing and specialty housing are also there. There's a number of smaller blue dots that you probably don't see on there. And then we have those that are in the light blue, where we are a partial interest where anywhere from a 50% general partner to a Class B share is almost 2,000 units. They're multifamily and, are largely tax credit and or revenue bonds or some kind of issuance where we've become involved in the financing. The largest project is Katama with 711 units. The smallest is one of our Orenco station projects, which is 52 units, and that was with Reach. Next slide. The balance of the regulated affordable housing is on the orange. We do want to caveat that we have not been able to independently vet the data yet. A lot of this data is coming from the state and multiple sources. We think there are approximately 7,000 in which the Housing Authority and the department is not directly involved with. We think these are mostly tax credits. They're owned, as I mentioned, by the nonprofits such as Star, and they're also the for-profits. So they're blend of both. And many are constructed before 2000, year 2000. So many of them are also at risk of having expiring regulatory agreements, because most of the regulatory agreements back then only lasted 30 years. Next slide, please. So this is a combination of all of both of those, where you see the blue and the orange and the location of where they are. And they're again following all that sort of the arc where the population for the county mainly reside. They are spread throughout the county, and you'll see that approximately 90% are in the larger project with over 31 units, and they're broken down by location. So overall, I think right now we're tallying at about 10,200 units. Again, not sure if that totality is accurate because we need to actually vet it. All of this will be, once we've vetted the data, you'll see there's a website out there that has a Tableau, and it will be available on our website. So we're gonna clean up this data and then put it on our website. So those who are interested in affordable housing and need affordable housing can say, oh, I'm interested in, say, Tigard. I don't need to see where Forest Grove is because all my work, my childcare, my kids are in school. So it will be easier to search for where the projects are. So going back, next slide, please. We wanted to go back to our discussion points, which is what roles should the Housing Authority hold to support and addressing housing gaps? What roles and purposes should be different depending on housing types? And last, what are some of the short and longer term risks that we should weigh in on? Implications for our assets, other concerns and considerations. So without further ado, I'm hoping you guys could help us work out through some of these issues.
You want one at a time, Jill, or just?
Popcorn, I guess whoever, I mean, I'm hopeful that you all, as our Housing Advisory Committee members, will help us start thinking about these. I see your hand up, Haley.
Are you ready for me to weigh in? One of the thoughts that I've had, and it's directly related to some of the work we do at the firm that I'm a part of, is more residential treatment facilities type of work. And you do a great job at the county acknowledging your partners in affordable housing and transitional housing, but there doesn't seem to be a acknowledgement of partnerships, and maybe there aren't partnerships, but where the population needs more treatment beyond perhaps even permanent supportive housing. And so in Washington County, like I know Sequoia Health is providing that type of care. Have you guys created relationships there? And are there partnerships? And it does seem, I'm sorry, I'm gonna keep going on a tangent here, but in hearing about Oregon Health Authority and the fact that the state is dealing with the ramifications of not providing enough treatment housing for people coming out of the hospitals, and really the only way for anyone to go is into incarceration, it does really seem that it's paramount that there needs to be housing that addresses people, more housing that addresses people with behavioral health and sort of longer term treatment challenges. And I just wasn't sure what the housing authority was doing and the role they were playing there in creating housing for that population.
It's interesting you should mention Sequoia Health because Sequoia is working with us in Heartwood. And Heartwood is permanent supportive housing, but as you mentioned, it is a difficult slog because many of the folks in the building require more than just you can call it quote unquote normal permanent supportive wraparound services. So we are struggling through it because the folks coming out from our referrals for, coordinated entry is at a higher need than traditional. But I would like Jess and her team to address that because we're working on.
I was actually hearing something, I like that feedback, Haley, and I was hearing something different slightly. Yes, of course, the work of permanent supportive housing is always going to be a harder population to serve because that's the nature of how it's designed and who it's designed to serve. And what I was hearing is that we do a great job of highlighting our partnerships when it comes to the development of a project, but the partnerships and operations in some way are just as important and harder. And how are we doing in highlighting those partnerships as well? I really like that question, and I think that's a good one for us to work on, and it's part of this continued integration of our programmatic work. So thank you.
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
Haley, I think one of those issues that we're also facing is with a harder to serve population in our buildings. We're finding also that property management is a gap. And training our property manager and partners is one where we need a little bit more, you can call it oversight and help for them.
I was just wondering too, if we could talk about an approach to treatment and our that we're going to be having in Cornell. I'd also, because it seemed like Haley was interested.
Yeah, let's go through all of those questions. I can't remember who is next.
Michelle.
Okay.
I just wanted to echo what Haley was saying, or at least like kind of highlight that as well. Working in an SHS contract and watching how people kind of clients, participants navigate through the system, mental health is by far the biggest thing we see impacting folks and their success in a placement, which then is alternatively, I think, having a negative impact on the outcomes of SHS and what SHS is trying to accomplish. And so it's really challenging to watch. And I think I just wanted to echo, that it would be great to see like additional partnerships and kind of how that works.
Thank you, Chrishelle. I think that's mostly a comment, but I'm going to take the opportunity to respond. I agree with your comment. In our homeless services work, one of the most important efforts underway is how we are learning as a housing kind of focused system to get better at partnering with our health system and the health system resources. Because we're working with people who need that medical care, medical or behavioral health care, recovery treatment, behavioral health services. All of these needs are features of, are constants in who we're serving, who are experiencing homelessness. But also it should not be the homeless services resources that we're leveraging to or solely utilizing to address those needs. So how do we build a system of care that leverages available Medicaid resources and strengthens those partnerships so that we are robustly providing those services to those households? Because if we're only relying on SHS resources, they're only going to go so far, and we're effectively leaving money on the table. So this is a continuous body of work. how to get smarter as a system in partnering with those health systems and their resources.
Thank you, Jess.
Dina?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I think I've shared this before, but Transcending Hope is a housing provider that has a certain passion for persons who identify with substance use disorder and or acute mental health. As a mom of 6, I have a son who resides in a secure residential treatment facility. He has for the last 3 years with the diagnosis of schizophrenia and fentanyl use. So I've navigated the system for the last 8 years and been pretty much heartbroken. And that's why I created Pathways. I also sit on the Oregon State Hospital Advisory Board, and I created a model of housing. We do aid and assist community restorations, which are direct placements from the Oregon State Hospital. We have 7 locations in Washington County. I think we have a total of 15 locations, but 7 are directly contracted with Washington County Behavioral Health and the aid and assist model. We also contract with Clackamas County Behavioral Health, and we are now going to contract with Multnomah County Behavioral Health. In the past, you guys have seen everything that's been happening in the news and at the Oregon State Hospital, but in the past, our people were released directly to the streets, or they were left indefinitely in jail or the hospital where they do not need to be. Aid and assist consumes the Oregon State Hospital. So, you know, the building that we get to build with Washington County Housing is going to support more acute mental health. And big cheerleaders I need to make this work and successful. But I'm also, you know, discussing options with the behavioral health analysts to the governor this week. I'm going to meet with them because we need more housing. And I'm also part of a NARC committee. So I'm here to help build those programs and to bring more operators aboard and relationships so that we can serve more of our people, and which directly impacts the homeless population. So, yeah.
Thank you, Dina. We're so excited for that project and grateful for your partnership in helping us get smarter at integrating these systems.
I have a couple of questions from Melinda in the chat. So, is Unite Oregon doing something on 209th for affordable housing with wraparound services? Is that correct?
I'm sorry, on 209th and
Yeah.
Alexander?
Unite Oregon.
In Unite Oregon. We are, Melinda, Chair Bell, that Alexander 209, that is a project that the Housing Authority is developing on Metro-owned land. And it is currently in early stage of design development. And we are working with, Unite Oregon is the partner that is the convening agency for our community. So and I think Melinda and Dina, you were both there, right? I think I saw both of you there in the little box, and I said hello to you because you were part of our committee that we reached out to get feedback on the design of that building. And we are so grateful for your feedback, by the way. And however, I do want to mention that particular building is a family size, it's focused on families, and it is not for supportive housing. We do not want to mix supportive housing with family necessarily unless it is a family supportive housing. So we're just making sure we don't mix those populations.
Another question is CAT set to open this year? CAT?
Or
CAT. The center.
Yes.
One of our sites is opened, it's at the Hillsborough location, and the Beaverton one is scheduled for later this year, I think. So yes, is the answer.
Great. And then was Bridges to Change able to secure vouchers for their transitional housing?
I'm not sure about this one, is anyone else?
Bridges to Change, I don't believe they use vouchers, do they? Bridges to Change.
So my question is, my question is, I know that they were trying to be able to allow people that have those emergency vouchers or those 2-year rapid rehousing vouchers to be able to accept people that have those vouchers so they can use that and go into transitional housing with Bridges to Change to be able to have a place to live and continue their sobriety.
I don't know off the top of my head whether or not those folks who are in the Bridges to Change building have rapid rehousing. I'll have to double check because I know.
No. You misunderstood my question. It's not that they have rapid rehousing. So here's a scenario. So I worked for New Narrative and I was a housing navigator at one point, and I had a participant who happened to be in Bridges to Change. We got into Bridges to Change housing straight out of prison. Okay, so he was he before he apparently had a Section 8 voucher or whatever. He lost it when he went to prison. He came out trying to regain his voucher, which he was unsuccessful doing. But he was staying in a Bridges to Change house, and he came across my caseload for the reentry housing. But since he was already in a Bridges to Change house, we couldn't support him. So basically, he lost that opportunity to have his rent being paid for the assistance being paid for 2 years while he get his stuff together in Bridges to Change housing. So he wasn't able to accept that reentry voucher, and in turn had to go out and look for a job to try to pay the rent at Bridges to Change. You see what I'm saying? I was just wondering if there was a connection where we've partnered with Bridges to Change to be able to accept those whatever rapid rehousing, reentry vouchers, COC, to be able to connect with them so that they can continue their housing and not have to worry about losing their housing because they can't have both. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Let us take this offline and do some research and get back to you. Is that all right?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Just doing a time check. We have
one question from Dina.
Oh,
go ahead.
I was just gonna state, because that was a strange scenario, because if someone would have been in our housing, if they're in transitional housing, they're considered homeless. So they're able to still access vouchers and transition with those vouchers. So just to Melinda's point, it's a strange scenario that they weren't able, we accept those vouchers. So for Bridges not to accept them, it's kind of strange. Just my thoughts, sorry.
Thank you, Dina. No, it's complicated work. And there are there are different eligibility requirements for different types of vouchers, and it can create confusion in the system for sure. So we're happy to dig into that one question further for you, Melinda, but I appreciate that clarification, Dina. The objective, and when we talk about our systems working together, this is exactly what we mean, how to make sure that we're providing helpful information and creating open doors to help people move through the system and not get dropped in those points of transition. So good question and great follow-up, Tina.
And I did realize we don't have any more time, but I did want to have the opportunity for all of you to revisit the questions. And if you have any other feedback, please feel free to just email us or call us, and then we would love to be able to continue the conversation.
Excellent. I know this feels like a rough transition, but we do have our colleagues in government relations here. Carly is here to give us a legislative update, and we'll pull those slides up in a moment. I'll just maybe editorialize a bit. Our Homeless Solutions Council got the version that was true Monday morning. The world is finalized, dust has settled. We know what our state housing budget looks like, and Carly will share that information momentarily. We'll have additional updates probably in a future meeting about policy bills that move forward, but we're excited to share these budget figures.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Hi, everyone. For the record, my name is Carly Silva Gabrielson. I'm one of the government relations managers at Washington County and have the honor and privilege of having the housing department in my portfolio. And I just wanted to thank you, Chair Bell, Vice Chair Kane, members of the committee for letting me join this meeting. As Nicole said, I'm going to provide a quick legislative update on some of the final funding decisions impacting the important work of ensuring that everyone has access to safe and affordable housing. As Nicole said, some of the figures on the slide have slightly changed, so I'll touch on a few of those. But just to kind of set the table, we are in the final leg of the legislative session. The constitutional sine die is this Sunday, June 29th. That means that the legislature could work up until midnight of this Sunday, completing final business. A big item left on the agenda is the transportation bill, so that's something that you'll see in the news over the coming days. But as Nicole said, on Monday, the legislature released the final budget bills for the session, which included the bill providing funding for the Oregon Housing and Community Services Department. That bill, which was HB 5011, has since passed both chambers and is expected to be sent to Governor Kotek hopefully this week to sign into law. I can share that when the OHCS budget was initially released, we were very alarmed to see significant cuts across the board, including a cut of almost $100 million for homelessness prevention services, which, as you all know, that includes cuts to emergency rent assistance, legal aid for those facing eviction, and cuts to a lot of supportive services such as tenant outreach and education. So we were pleased to join a really strong coalition of advocates, housing advocates from across the state, and lobbying lawmakers and those in the Washington County delegation to increase funding for prevention services and, frankly, communicate the real life impacts that this reduction of funding would have in our communities across the state. I am happy to share that in result of this, the legislature did add back in $11 million for prevention. However, I know I can be frank that this is still a dramatic and devastating funding reduction that is projected to result in about 20,000 households not having access to those critical programs that they would have had access to just 2 years ago. We do know that the $11 million increase will help prevent approximately 1,500 evictions, but the need is just so significant. We saw that in 2024, there was over 27,000 eviction cases filed in Oregon. So really the result of this is that families and Oregonians across the state will have less access to those services that are so desperately needed. So we are planning on continuing to advocate that funding is restored in future sessions and to really ensure that lawmakers understand that a dollar spent in the housing homelessness prevention space is so valuable to our communities and to future generations, frankly. So we continue to champion this work and are already looking towards opportunities in future years for expanding the funding. I also want to highlight the funding for affordable housing preservation, which frankly did come in much lower than the Housing Coalition was advocating for. It also came in lower than what the Governor Kotek had requested, which was $100 million for preservation. And ultimately, that figure landed in being funded at $52.5 million. That did include $2.5 million for manufactured home park preservation. But again, it is a fraction of what the need is and what the ask was from Governor Kotek and many in the housing space. So I can be frank and say that it's really clear that our collective work continues, and the work that you all do in this space is very important to helping advocate for what happens in Salem and telling those real life stories. So I look forward to continuing to work together and ensuring that we really can champion additional resources to expand access and opportunity across the housing continuum for our communities. So not extremely positive news, but funding that will help maintain a lot of our crucial work, and again, opportunities to highlight why more funding is needed. So I think I'll pause there and maybe open for questions or allow my colleagues in the room to add onto that. Thank you so much. I see Nathan, so I'll just, I guess, jump in and call on you, sir.
Hi, Carly. Thanks for the presentation. Do you have a sense of, because I was in a Housing Alliance meeting yesterday, and there was quite a bit of surprise expressed by members about some of the reductions relative to their expectations in the governor's budget. Do you have a read on how much of that is just the economics of the budget, I guess, versus the idea that the legislature is prioritizing other areas outside of housing? Like, is this just some of the cuts that came in were surprising? Is that just the legislature trying to balance the budget in your mind, or is it something else?
That's a really good question, Nathan. I think the reality is that it's a hybrid of both. I think, we really, as we all know, are facing a very difficult budgetary climate with federal cuts and less resources in the state. And I do also think that some members of the legislature are concerned about the expanded costs of providing these services and are looking for additional support, but also realizing that that's not going to be coming from the federal government. So I think it's really just a reality of constrained resources, first and foremost.
Carly, Molly here. Can you elaborate a little bit on the long-term rent assistance, big jump in investment? How many households? Does that mean Washington County will get a portion of that?
Absolutely. I don't have those numbers in front of me, Molly, so perhaps we could provide that via email and a follow-up. But yes, I mean, we are happy to see, obviously, that increase, but know that it really is not going to address the need on the ground. So in terms of how many households in Washington County, I think we'll have to take a closer look at that.
And Carly, if it's all right, I might add a bit more color in talking to folks at the agency. There was initially 2 pots of long-term rental assistance that were suggested, one for EO regions, which essentially includes every continuum of care except for the balance of state, and a separate for the balance of state. Those were combined into one investment in the legislative budget. So the agency will need to work through what formula they want to use to disperse funds. I imagine it will be some time before we fully understand what's coming to us. Any other questions for Carly?
So we have acronyms. So what does LIFT stand for?
It's Local Innovation Fast Track Funds. And those are the funds that the state issues through what is Q11 bonds, and it's specific for capital.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Carly. Appreciate you being here, and we might ask you to come back to share some more policy updates in the future. Appreciate your time.
I look forward to that, and feel free to send any questions that you have about any bills or the impact of the budget as things progress to our great staff, and we're happy to follow up. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thanks, Carly. Okay, we're moving on from our ongoing business into some new business and department updates. I will turn things over to Ryan, who'll be sharing an update on auditing.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Ryan Bonsbach, Deputy CFO. We've talked a lot about future budgets, and now we're going to go back in time to look at a previous year at the audits that were recently released by the county, and includes the Housing Authority as a component unit. So we've already shared versions of this same presentation with the county's audit committee, as well as the Board of County Commissioners on Tuesday. For approval of the action plan that goes to the state. And let's see, there are findings in the audit as it relates to the county. We're going to focus on those in the Housing Authority. I think this is also a good time before I go any further, just to acknowledge that while the Housing Authority had findings, we'll just lead with the good news that there was no evidence, no finding of waste, fraud, or abuse. So we're taking the findings really seriously, as we'll talk about. And we have an action plan to get back on track, both here in the Housing Authority and the broader Washington County entity. But we are happy to report that there is no evidence of waste, fraud, or abuse. Next slide, please. So we'll do a really quick overview of what an audit is and why it matters. For anyone who isn't familiar with public sector government audits, we'll go through the findings that the Housing Authority had for the 23-24 fiscal year, do a little overview of our management actions, next steps that we have, and then have time for questions at the end. Next slide. Just real quick, what an audit is. A financial statement audit assesses whether or not the financial statements of an entity present a fair and material correct representation of their activities and financial position. We have an outside auditor, a local firm, TKW, who conducts audits for the entire county, including the Housing Authority. And it's an Oregon law that requires that all local government entities need to be audited at least once every calendar fiscal year. Next slide. We're going to talk a little bit about two different audit documents that are produced in the audit process. So more acronyms that we'll go over, but I'll spell them out. So ACFR is the Annual Consolidated Financial Report. This is the large 300-page countywide document, really detailed information going department by department and countywide. The other document that we'll be talking about is called the SEFA, the Schedule of Expenditures of Federal Awards. So this applies to anybody who is receiving and using federal funds. So obviously here in the Housing Authority, we're using the voucher program and the Continuum of Care program through HUD. And there was, within the Housing Authority, there was a finding in our financial controls, and then there were findings in our federal programs that were programmatic findings. So not financial, but kind of document retention, program execution types of findings. Next slide. We'll talk a little bit about two different terms. Audit findings that are significant enough to merit the attention of government or governance bodies. There are material weaknesses. This is the most significant type of audit finding, and essentially what it is saying is that there are not the controls in place to prevent a misstatement of finances or activities, and that it would be corrected on a timely basis. Significant deficiencies are a less severe type of finding, but still really are important enough that they warrant the attention of those in charge with our governance, right? And so county commissioners, this advisory committee, anyone who's providing oversight should be aware of what these are. Next slide. Why audits are important. First and foremost, we're a public agency with a mission of public service, and so we need to maintain public trust, which is why part of the reason why we're audited every year, part of the reason why the results are published, transparent, and why we're responding to the state with an action plan. And then at a very just practical level, audit findings affect your bond rating. Also, really good news that we recently received, the county went back in front of Moody's, one of the rating agencies, and the county will be retaining its AAA rating, so the highest bond rating that you can have, the county will be retaining. So especially in light of having audit findings, really good signal that despite that, we are on the right track and we still are an attractive credit risk. So that we'll be continue to be able to raise funds through bonds at the lowest possible interest rates. It's also important for our own internal controls to make sure that we're executing our programs efficiently and effectively and engaging in process improvement. So one of the things that we really try to focus on is that we try to avoid audit findings, and when we have them, it's an opportunity to learn, strengthen, and improve our own processes. Next slide. So one more slide, let's just jump right into the findings. Some of these are grouped together, and again, I'm just looking here at the ones that were for the Housing Authority. For this finding specifically, it was really similar to the same finding at the county level, specifically in their finance department. This was our finding that was a material weakness, and this was really over our internal control environment as it relates to financial reporting. Really similar to what we saw at the county finance department, their division had really rapid turnover and vacancies of critical positions. So we agreed with the finding, and we're addressing it through staffing, training, and updated procedures. So kind of alongside the county finance department, the county finance department recently hired a permanent CFO, onboarded a deputy CFO, and a chief accountant. Similarly, after my onboarding, we're in the final stages of recruiting for a controller and have 2 more positions that we're putting back into place. And at that point, we will be fully staffed and ready to move into our next phase of rebuilding. On the training front, my team, the finance and accounting and budgeting team, is getting training specific to government financial management through the Government Finance Officers Association, the primary professional association of our field, and then also training specific to our mission focus. So affordable housing, vouchers through a number of different venues. And we're also really focused on updating our procedures and documenting them. Documentation and updated policies is one of the best things that you can do to withstand transition into the future. So as we experience other turnover, if we don't have that knowledge residing in one person's head, but formalized in a central place, we can withstand those transitions as people move on, and we have really well documented policies. Let's go to the next finding. This grouping of findings was all in the voucher program. And really what this finding identified in a few different areas was around document retention more than anything else. And so the auditor's recommendation, which the county agrees with, is that the staff preparing a rent reasonableness determination or a HUD report or a voucher issuance should be reviewed by somebody other than that preparer before it's being submitted. So we've already put in place checklists and updated routing to make sure that all of those boxes are checked prior to issuing the voucher or making the rent reasonableness determination. Specific to the rent reasonableness determination, we're also using a third-party system that makes that determination for us and documents it. Let's go to the next finding. So this finding was in our inspections of public housing units. So during this period, again, this was the 23-24 fiscal year that we're talking about here. We were in the process of expanding the team of inspectors from 2 to 5. This was also kind of on the heels of a significant backlog of inspections that we had coming out of the pandemic when those inspections had been temporarily paused. That led to why we missed a few inspections. Going forward, we've put a new process in place that identifies us ahead of time proactively when we have units that are approaching the 24-month window to have those inspections completed. Let's go one more, and this is our last finding. This is specific to the HUD's Continuum of Care program. There's a 25% matching requirement, and the finding here, we budgeted for the 25% match. We planned for it. It was in our approved budget. What we didn't have for this year was evidence of a review during the year to match the specific expenditures to make sure that they met that 25% threshold. So again, a common theme that we've seen throughout all of these programmatic findings are really around document retention. And so just making sure that our policies and workflows clearly show that we are doing the required steps and then preserving the documentation around that. Let's go to the next slide. So I've talked a little bit about this broadly. This is kind of shared leadership between the Housing Authority, DHS, and the broader county. We're really focused on rebuilding our staffing to address the high turnover that we've had. We're well underway to do that. We're focusing on the control environment, so getting back to some routine month-end closes of our financial books that we have previously moved away from, but are very close to being back in a routine rhythm to do those management reviews on a monthly basis. And then, like I mentioned earlier, policy systems and process. So have a few draft revisions underway of our fiscal policies. The county is going to release new updates to their countywide fiscal policy in December. So it's a little bit odd to be talking about a fiscal year that was 2 fiscal years ago. And in a lot of cases, we've already put into place the management responses that deal with what the audit findings are. We've had a lot of support from our elected officials and county leadership in terms of acknowledging that we're on the right track, a lot of support to invest in employees to address these things and really acknowledge that these are not kind of individual failings on employees, but these are kind of broad systemic county-wide things that we are all collectively addressing right now. Next slide. I think we'll probably open it up for questions at this point. If anyone has questions about the audit findings, the audit process.
I just have one question. You mentioned a third party coming in. Is that to establish whether or not somebody's income matches the program?
The rent reasonableness determination? Yeah. I'm going to attempt the answer if Jill or Jess or Lisa or Molly. So this is, I think, the rent reasonableness is really related to the property that we are attempting to get a voucher for to make sure that is rent reasonable. And there's a third-party online system that we use that will, using geographic data and market data, can make that determination for us. So it's just a smoother way that we can make that determination, make sure that we're keeping that documentation, that record.
So that refers to the property,
yes,
the individual. Okay.
Nicely done, Ryan.
Oh, good.
Paid,
Yeah.
so excited out loud. Excellent. What did you say earlier? Old hands. All right.
That was Brian.
Not seeing any other questions, just want to hold for a little bit longer. All right, well, we'll move on to our last item, which is now time for members to share any suggestions for future discussions or things you'd like to see staff bring forward to this group.
I have something to share. I don't know if it's a future topic or anything. And that I had asked about other partners and people that maybe aren't getting dollars from the housing services. And there's an event for Hope Center coming up in July that will have more information about their programs and because they do housing and feeding and everything. So I have a couple of papers here if anybody's interested.
And then we can pass that out, maybe just email those out as well for folks that are online. Any other member updates? Announcements? All right, well, if there's no additional business, I'll now ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
A second?
Second, second.
All right, I will now call this meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Holiday.